What's the most Michael Scottish thing your boss ever did? As a blizzard approached, he offered to drive home anybody who needed a ride because he'd just bought a new, badass Hummer H2 that could drive through anything. An hour later, he and three of my coworkers are sitting in his new SUV in a snowdrift on the side of the road, waiting for the wife of one of them to pick them up. Commenter: this is one of the most Michael things here because it hits all the check marks. Being excited about a new thing he got, wildly overestimating the impressiveness of said thing, trying to get his employees to like him by doing an unnecessary, unhelpful, but ultimately nice thing, assuming the employees are in need of his help in the first place. The whole thing blows up in his face, of course. Winds up getting bailed out by someone he probably was embarrassed to accept help from. Not just his employee, but the employee's wife. Story 2, Mandatory Staff Appreciation Day. It fell on my day off, and I had to come in to participate in the team-building activities that were scheduled. It went from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which was longer than a normal shift. That was my only day off that week. Story 3, it's either the time he talked about his divorce to a couple trying to rent tuxedos from us, or the time when an African-American couple walked in, he switched from the normal greeting, "Welcome to Tuxedo Store," to "What's up, brother?" Story 4. My one boss, an absolute nightmare of a human, carried all of his paperwork around in a black trash bag. And he was rich, like filthy rich. He inherited his father's contracting company, and during the boom of the early 2000s made a ton of money. But he said he didn't trust briefcases. Yeah, I know. So one night he left his trash case in an office and a cleaning woman threw it out. All contracts, building specs, whatever, gone. Story 5. A few coworkers and I competed in a local office-themed trivia contest. We came in second place, and one of the prizes was a World's Best Boss mug. We brought it into work and displayed it proudly like a trophy in one of our offices. My boss, who was not involved in the contest, has never seen the office, is not friends with or well-liked by any of us, and is a huge idiot, saw the mug in someone else's office and just took it. None of us could figure out where it had gone until we saw her drinking out of it. Story 6. It was this guy's last day with the company, and the managers brought in a cake for everyone to share. A very nice farewell gesture. Except he wasn't moving to a new city or leaving the company for a new job. He had gotten fired. The managers literally fired this guy, then called everyone into the kitchen and said, "Okay, today is Steve's last day with the company. Let's have some cake." Most oblivious, socially awkward, tone-deaf moment imaginable. Commenter: they tried that when I got laid off when my company was downsizing. I hate dealing with any sort of confrontation, and even worse hate being the center of attention. So I didn't tell any of my coworkers. I was the only one in the 6-person team leaving. So others didn't even know we were doing a reorg and a bunch of jobs were being cut because duck that place. My last day, the new supervisor brought in pastries, and then half an hour before I was supposed to leave, sent out a blast email to the entire department about how it was my last day, and they were going to miss me so much, and I was surely on to bigger and better things. Worst last day ever. All I wanted to do was walk out like normal, no stupid crying in the hallway, whatever, and instead had 40 damn people I'm in me, emailing me, calling me, coming up to desk to find out A, why I was leaving, and B, why I hadn't said anything to them. It was not a good moment. Story 7. My boss took us to a farmer's market for an office lunch outing, and when me and my 2 coworkers walked over to his table after having browsed and eaten, he told his attorney friend he was with, "They don't like to be too far from daddy." Story 8. I still giggle when I think about it. I had a boss who got a promotion to senior manager. The very next day, he pulled into the parking lot with a BMW 1 Series. No one on my team even knew they made a 1 Series. Cheapest possible BMW badge car. He gets out wearing a BMW Polo and a white BMW hat. He offered to take me to lunch in it. He jumps on the highway, adjusts his BMW hat, and says to me, "I don't exactly do 60 in this thing," does a little triumphant laughter, and starts going 80. There was a cop on the bridge above us. We were immediately pulled over. I will never forget the look of defeat on his face. Story 9. He was approved to buy a furniture set for out new office waiting room. He bought one, then took it home and brought his old living room furniture for the office to use. Then when they shut that office down a year later, he took his old furniture back instead of letting them take it to the new office location. Story 10. After a successful project, owner of the company invited everyone out to lunch, about 12 employees, at a nearby restaurant by the office. Little did she know, the place was very expensive. So she bounces early before the check comes, stating that she had a client call. She gives us money to pay for her meal and takes off, leaving the rest of us to figure out the check. It also turns out she didn't give us enough money to pay for her portion of the check, so someone had to throw in a few extra bucks to cover that. There's a little bar next to our old office that we would go to sometimes on Friday after work to have a few beers. There was usually 4 or 5 of us. We never asked one of my bosses because no one ever wanted to be around him during work. So why would we want to be around him when we aren't getting paid to do so, and don't have to? He finds out we are going and tags along. We get a table and he starts pounding beers. We usually have 1 or 2 and then go home. He asks if any of us are hungry, and we all tell him no, that we all have food waiting at home or plans with our SOs to go get dinner. He proceeds to then order 6 different appetizers. The food comes, and he is the only one to eat any of it, and then he gets up and tells everyone he'll see us on Monday. We were stuck paying for all the food and his beer. None of us even wanted to take any of the food home because he basically finger-ducked all of it while to clean them off. I still to this day am thinking of how to get him back for this, and it happened probably 10 years ago. Story 11. My boss would confuse the word fillet and BJ. I about lost it a few times when he came up and said, "If we don't get XX done by the deadline, they're going to BJ us in the next meeting." Story 12. Made someone come with him to get his shoes shined because he wanted someone to talk to. Except, we all wore sneakers. So the lucky guy got to just stand there and wait while he got his shoe shined. Story 13. We work in digital marketing. He stalks our coworkers on social media and brings up their posts at weird times. We'll be in a meeting and he'll bring up someone's weekend plans from a month ago in front of everyone. Most of the time, he's not even friends with these people. It's so awkward and cringy. Story 14. I honestly don't know if this is Michael Scott behavior, but this was absolutely batcrap insane, and I don't know how else to categorize it. Context. We were having an all-hands meeting where the CEO of a small company, 50-ish employees, announced that he had just fired the CFO for embezzlement. We all knew he was full of crap, and he fired the CFO because she disagreed with a decision. Anyhow, right after he announced this, he offered $100 as a morale booster to anyone who could sing the entire Tigger song from Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, so one brave girl gets up and starts singing the whole song. She gets to the last line and messes up one word. The CEO says that it doesn't count, pockets his own 100 bill, then proceeds to sing and dance to the whole song while we stand there, watching him, mouths agape. When he finishes, striking a maniacal pose with, "And I'm the only one," we are all eerily silent. He then straightens up, unbuttons his suit jacket, and shows us the lyrics to the song have been embroidered on the inner lining. I'm 40 years old and have been working as a professional for 22 years. I've seen some crap, but I've never seen anything remotely as crazy as this, and I pray that I never do again. A couple other fun stories from this guy. He'd come in while we were trying to work and challenge us to planking and squat contests. No one ever took him up on the offer, but he'd still plank and squat just the same. Hard to focus on coding when the guy who signs your paycheck is 3 feet away from you, covered in sweat, grunting and groaning. After firing the CFO, he took it upon himself to handle all hirings and firings. We found out that this usually meant that he would face creep the candidates and only bring in women of a certain caliber. He rarely hired men unless they were on the div team, like myself. He was very into cycling and would often wear asterisk, only asterisk his cycling outfit the entire day. Coupled with his lack of understanding of personal space, this resulted in highly awkward situations. We once walked past his office when he was conducting one of his hot girl interviews, only to see him on the ground, doing push-ups in front of her. He highly encouraged us to join the gym, offering to let us wear our workout clothing if we exercised at lunch. But then he would give us men a hard time about it. It was clear he only had the policy to see the girls wear skimpy clothes, which they never did. He would bring in a masseuse every few weeks. It was a male masseuse, so typically only women would sign up for it. Once, a female colleague canceled and offered her spot to me instead. When I got to the conference room that doubled as the massage parlor, changing area, I noticed that there was an active webcam hidden in a plant. Dude was an abuser. At first, he was kind of entertaining. The dude was just noticeably off his nut, but usually he'd make up for his crazy behavior by doing nice things. I only stayed for about a year, though. He fired the CFO about 6 months into my tenure, and he, as well as the company itself, started getting really unstable. I discovered that the company had a huge software licensing issue, and when I let him know, he publicly humiliated me, full-on screaming at me, talking baby talk, scolding me like a bad dog, all this right in front of all of my colleagues. I should note that I did not approach him to discuss the licensing problems in front of everyone. He asked me what I was working on as I was writing up the report. I tried to be discreet about it, but he kept probing until I had no choice but to tell him everything I discovered. I started looking for a new job right away. From what I understand, things got much worse after I left. Story 15. He cooked us lunch. This was at a mattress store. This was meant to be a reward incentive because, quote, he was a damn good cook. He would cook us the damn best meal you have ever eaten. He built it up all week. We did not have the facilities for cooking, so he cooked us chicken burgers in a vertical grill. Dodgy, pub-grade chicken burgers. That only the dodgiest, scummiest pub would ever sell as like their Tuesday $5 lunch special. Later, when he was out of the store, because he was always out of the store, we were out the back all smoking, and we just sort of look at each other. I said, we only ate that out of sympathy, right? Yeah. Story 16. Not my boss, but a guy created a few scholarships at the university I was at. And then something weird happened, like they were supposed to be 4-year deals. but he only had the money for 1 year. Anyways, when it happened, I remembered someone saying Scott's tots, ed them. Story 17. We legitimately had to lay off 4 people last year, and management decided to wait until the day before the Halloween office party to do it. No joke. It was like the Halloween episode in real life. Story 18. This is a story from my brother. He works at a credit union, and one morning around 10, his boss walks out of his office asking if anyone wants the other half he cut off of this huge bran muffin he had for breakfast. Everyone there said they were fine, and the boss went back into his office. Later, around 12, an employee comes in for her shift with a box full of donuts to share with the office. Everyone came up and took one, thanking the employee for bringing in the treat. The boss was visibly mad that everyone went for the donuts and no one wanted his half of his bran muffin. He was just a big grump for the rest of the day. Story 19. My boss's boss saw a guy walking down the hallway at work with his hoodie up. He proceeded to say, "Hands up, don't shoot." No one really knew what to say, and the guy with his hoodie up was just cold. Story 20. Got the go-ahead from corporate to buy a new coffee machine for the office. Bought a new Keurig, took it home, and brought in his own old coffee machine for the staff to use. Terrible person, you know who you are. Story 21. On my last day at a sucky catering job, my boss gave me an ultimatum. Work the rest of the night, or record me embarrassingly doing the Dougie and post it on Snapchat. Shortest shift I ever worked. Story 22. We had mice. Boss man was terrified of mice and a total skinflint who didn't want to pay for an exterminator. His big idea, I crap you not, was to give me cotton to put in my ears and a blowhorn. He then opened the back door, closed all other doors in the little shop, and I had to attempt to herd mice out of the store with a damn air horn with cotton balls sticking out of my ears. I tried to explain why it wouldn't work, but he essentially told me not to worry my pretty little head over it, and that was my entire afternoon. Most ridiculous crap I've ever done at a job ever before and ever since. Story 23. I had a boss that was much older than I was, and he resented the fact that I was more competent, efficient than him. Mid-year review. Boss. I tried to fire you twice. Me. What? Why? Boss. My boss wouldn't let me. Me, but what did I do? Boss. I don't want to talk about it. Me. Okay, that's not helpful. If you don't tell me what I did, there's no way I can correct the behavior. Boss. I don't like the way you talk to me sometimes. Me. Jim face at camera. Story 24. Announced it to everyone if he got laid the previous night. Fortunately, it wasn't that often. Oh yeah, same guy put it in one person's performance appraisal that she'd get a better rating next year if she didn't do something dumb like get pregnant. Story 25. I handed him an aerial image I had printed. He told me I needed to reprint it and rotate it 180 degrees. I walked to my cubicle, waited a minute, handed it back to him right side up. His reply, perfect. Story 26. I worked in it. Boss says, I want someone with a clipboard to go into the server room each morning. Me. Whatever for? Boss. They need to mark all the green lights they see on the servers. Me. Why? Boss. That way we know our servers are working. I wish I was making that up. Story 27. My supervisor left to start his own software company. They subleased their office from my employer. When the company failed, my employer hired him back along with several of his employees. Story 28. She told me I could take a day off when I was dealing with some severe insomnia problems. Then came running into my office 5 minutes later to say too many people had the day off already. 2 people whose jobs didn't overlap with mine. Turns out it was because she wanted to take a half day and didn't want the place to look unstaffed. Yesterday, however, she did take the day off when multiple other people were out and left us with just 2 people of 6. She has also brought in her soy milk maker into the office and kept talking about it. She was also using the lunchroom toaster oven to make cakes, but not for us. She also just last week started telling people all about her UTI, in particular, in front of the brand new employee that was at that moment being introduced to her. She also buys food for her daughters, using the company credit card when she is supposed to be out shopping for things for the company. So far, she has not been caught. Oh, and most recently, she asked a coworker to try not to schedule her mother's funeral anywhere within the 3-week span that she would be taking her vacation because that wouldn't be convenient. She said it somewhat, but not completely jokingly, but brought it up more than once. I could go on. She's like the more malicious version of Michael Scott you see in the earliest episodes. Story 29. Told everyone to go home because we weren't making sales, then scolded us for getting up and starting to walk out, saying we should be fighting for out seats. Like, idiot, we're cold calling here for commission, only we aren't going to fight for crap. Story 30. First morning of the summer camp I worked at, our camp director brings the campers, 1st through 3rd graders, to the basketball court, gives a fun speech while bouncing a kickball around to kick off the camp, ends it with, all right guys, let's have a great summer, and punts the kickball, accidentally, straight into a 1st grader's face who falls to the ground and starts crying very loudly. This is just the first one I thought of. I was making the Michael Scott comparisons from the first day I met him. Story 31. I had a boss. Dave, who was head of sales, and he was notorious for taking people's food out of the fridge or off their desk to eat, right in front of them. He was also always late for meetings. Well, one day we were sitting in an all-managers meeting, and Dave comes in late as usual with his always-present cup of coffee and sits down. There was a small lull in the meeting, and Dave looks across the table at Katie, who just had a baby, and says, "Katie, I hope you don't mind, but I used the rest of your milk in the fridge." Katie turned pale and looked at him with the most embarrassed and angry look and said, "That's my breast milk I've been pumping." Dave just sat there, looked her square in the eye, and without breaking his gaze, sipped his coffee the rest of the meeting. Story 32. I used to work for a Broadway theater producer, and we were in a meeting about the ADA, the act that requires places of business to accommodate the disabled. Like Michael Scott, our vice president had come to his position through no merits of his own and had no idea what he was doing, let alone how to run a meeting. So he starts us off with, "Okay, so we're going to go around, and I want us all to share if we know someone who's disabled." It was just like when Ed Truck dies and he's asking people to share stories of loved ones dying. As people are awkwardly sharing, our boss is completely detached from the touchiness of the subject. Every time someone talks about their crippled granny or terminally ill cousin, he's like, "This is good, really getting the juices flowing here." One of the senior managers said, "Well, boss, as you know, my uncle had Parkinson's." To which my boss replies, "Oh, great. Was he in a wheelchair?" Then we watched the Office Industrial the ADA puts out, specifically the scene on wheelchairs-bound customers. As it finishes and we're talking, the next chapter starts up on the projector. It's midgets. Our boss stops the meeting and is like, "Ooh, midgets we have to watch." So then we watched midgets. It was not a productive meeting. Story 33. I used to work graveyards. Once a month, I was required to come in on Friday afternoon for a staff meeting at 1 p.m. This was essentially forcing me to come into work at 3 a.m. for regular people, just so I felt included in the warehouse. Also, since I did not work Friday, Saturday nights, it was essentially having me show up on a normal person's Saturday at 3 a.m. She had the gall to yell at me for showing up in my pajamas and not proper warehouse clothing. Story 34. My manager tried to get the nickname he had chosen for himself to catch on. The nickname in question was Hollywood. He would introduce himself to new workers, visitors, etc. As Hollywood, one of us would say, "No one calls him that," and he would just be like, "Well, everyone calls me that." Story 35. He once said in a meeting that he started watching The Office, but it was hard to watch because he recognized himself as Michael. Spoiler, he's not as likable. He has suits that are themed to holidays. A Christmas suit, a shamrock suit, a pink Valentine's Day suit, a patriotic Independence Day suit, and my favorite, his birthday suit, which is decorated like an 80s wallpaper. Think that restaurant from Saved by the Bell. Sometimes he'll wear the same suit multiple times near a holiday to get maximum exposure of people who see him when he's not feeling broke. His St. Patrick's Day suit has a gold pot accessory that he will fill up with gold coins and give them away to random people. Random means girls, women that are too young or out of his league. I saw him run to intercept a woman he was obsessed with after seeing her on our group walks a few times. For a very weird period of time, he was growing his hair out. He started telling people that he would get his hair cut when he finally got some action, then kept repeatedly mentioning things like meeting a new woman tonight, hope I get a haircut, har, is this too long? I can't stop. He wears a fedora. Once he asked me about it, and I told him that it was actually impolite. To wear a hat indoors according to the website I looked it up on, and he was very sad, but then later decided he didn't care and kept wearing it. A black and gray pinstriped fedora, often with dad jeans and a polo, short sleeve button down. He dressed up as Santa for one of our holiday parties, then photoshopped himself into a pic with Santa where he was giving himself gotcha finger guns. He gets these Shutterfly photo books made with the cringiest captions, and puts them in the break room for all to see. In one picture, he captioned it as skinny dipping, and the photo had no parts, but was taken at an angle down his hip leg. When he goes on vacation, he likes to announce it in our publicly broadcast meetings. Then he'll also thank his brother for house sitting to confuse the potential burglars. He has a personal website with an awful resume. He does Toastmasters and posts all his PowerPoints on there, including ones that reference his ex-wife and their sex life issues. He once showed a video at an all-staff meeting where he was wearing his money suit, forgot one from earlier, and talking about Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. This has nothing to do with our job, and the video is so Michael Scott. He gets up at the end and reveals he's only wearing the suit top and boxers. The first line of the video is, "Coming to you live from New York. I'm Johnny Cash and I'm here to talk to you about money." Holds up stack of bills. Awkward pause. Sure, those are just ones, and I'm really not Johnny Cash. There's probably more. I'll come back if I think of them. Story 36. This is previous job, but some examples. It was the Friday before a long weekend, and I was getting ready to head out. He comes up to me and asks me what I'm up to. I said not too much, hoping for a relaxing weekend. He then makes a pleasure himself motion with his hands and goes, "Make sure you don't too much relaxing, eh?" One of my coworkers was having a fight with her boyfriend and was telling me about it. He walks by and listens in on the conversation and goes, oh, I know someone who's not getting laid tonight. We went to a work event, and one of the team building exercises was that you and your colleagues are stuck on a desert island with specific items, and you have to figure out how to use them to survive together. At the end of the exercise, when it came time for us to describe our strategies, he referred to one of the groups that had 1 girl and 5 guys in it, going, and these guys have 1 woman and a bunch of dudes. I think we all know what that means. He was a character, not a bad guy by any means, and he's generally fairly nice and considerate, just really tone-deaf and inappropriate sometimes. Story 37 had us rank each other in order from 1 to 20 of who is the overall hardest worker. Told us no one would know the results. Next day reads the order out loud. The people ranked from 15 to 20 now knew what everyone thought of them. Killed staff morale. Story 38. She would do almost no work at all. She would come into our offices and bother us while we were working, talking about how bored she was and how we should redecorate our offices. Any work she got, she would just forward the emails to someone and never even read them herself. Then she would decide often how we needed to change the furniture in her office, move things around, paint a wall in her office. She would call meetings 3 times a day to talk about nonsense, and they would go for about an hour each time on nothing. Story 39. Told him my parents' names. My dad has a traditionally feminine name, and he said, no wonder you're confused. Both your parents have lady names. I really regret coming out to him. I'm basically Oscar Martinez to his Michael Scott. Story 40. HR mandated personal development course. They did them every year, and they always centered around not discriminating in some way. Well, one year they had a new lady in charge of it. The topic was invisible disabilities. Basically, some form of disability which is not visually apparent. The task we had was to write down a list of challenges a person with the disability might face in everyday life. Then we had to act out a scene showing how these challenges would affect them. We asked her to clarify, and it became apparent. She was literally asking us to stereotype disabled people and basically mock their daily lives. That HR lady was not present for any of the future rounds of training. Story 41. We had a particularly demanding client, and a couple of the project managers were having trouble keeping him pleased. After hearing them complain, Larry, the boss, pulled out his flip phone and said, let's call him right now, and put him on speakerphone. After making a show of being the tough guy and putting him in his place, he got in the last word, flipped the phone closed, and put it in his shirt pocket. He proudly told the room, you see, that's how you handle an a-hole. Then from his pocket we heard, I'm still here, sir. Larry fumbled for his phone while stammering, hung it up correctly, and dismissed us. Story 42. We had this new girl hostess start working at my job, and she was a pretty 20-something girl with a pretty big butt. So one day, good old Bossman walks into the dining area and sees the new girl and says out loud, hey Chloe, did they paint those pants on you in front of a table she was working at? And she ended up crying and left the job not too long after that. Story 43. At a phone store I worked at, our boss constantly reminded us to wipe the memory of every display phone or phone customers had returned, anything that could have customer details. He hammered this in. He sold a fellow employee one of his old phones, didn't wipe it. On the phone were pictures of him pleasure on sex toy. Story 44. I work with handicapped and elderly people. I am the face-to-face. My boss is scheduling and programming. She has yelled at stroke victims because she can't understand them, hung up on elderly who can't understand what she's saying, and refused access to people who cannot pay full price for the service because she thinks they're scamming. We are a nonprofit and receive multiple donations and bursaries to assist financial need people. She asks casual drivers to work for free and won't fire anyone, just never calls them. She is astonishingly inept and is the first point of contact for anyone using our service. Many people don't understand it's not me on the phone, so that's always fun when she's been a douche. She has a physical handicap herself, so her lack of compassion for the people we assist is really disappointing. She hung up on a woman who doesn't speak English as first language because she couldn't understand her just 20 minutes ago, and the woman is understandably upset. She answers to a board of senior citizens in a small town, and they are all just so impressed by her because she uses a cane that they make allowances for completely inappropriate behavior that I would be dismissed for in a heartbeat. It's time to find a new job. Story 45. We started a startup a few years ago with an idea and found a few investors, one of which was the rich father of the guy who I went to school with and graduated together. Obviously, he became our vice president because of his dad, and also because, according to himself, he cannot work in a company unless he is in charge and he cannot take orders from a boss. At that time, I did not watch The Office, but last year. When I watched it for the first time, I was surprised how Michael Scott resembles him. A few examples on top of my head. One morning, I was in his office when one of the employees, 5 employees total, got to the office late, maybe 9:45 or something. As she walked in, he asked her why she was late, and she replied with some excuse and walked away. He turned to me and said, "Did you see that? She thinks that she is smarter than me." Someone needs to tell her that if she was smarter than me, she would be running this company, not me. He arranged office soccer with a bunch of people from school. During the game, he was totally a Michael Scott, if you recall him playing basketball. He was out of shape and barely could run and sucked at soccer, but he would yell at employees for not running enough and not passing the ball to him, and he would get really pissed if someone used good soccer skills on him. He would occasionally use the phrase, "Guys, remember, you are very valuable to this company. In this company, I am the brain and you are the muscles." One time we were having lunch with other coworkers and I was having a salad. Here is the conversation. Him: "I have noticed you are having salad every day these days. What's up?" Me: "Well, I haven't been able to go to the gym in the past few weeks and I've been sitting at my desk all day. I got to watch my calories, otherwise I'll gain weight." Him: "You must have some genetic problem. I have never gone to a gym and I have been sitting all day every day at my desk in the past 8 years and I am fine. Now I am not a muscular jock or anything, but I regularly exercise and I am relatively fit." He, on the other hand, is known for being overweight to everyone who knows him. Everybody at the table was shocked at this conversation. Good times. Story 46. Was at a funeral for a coworker's husband who I was good friends with as well, and my boss came along for support. He had bought a large floral arrangement for it and spent most of the service nudging me on the shoulder and pointing to it in a, "Eh? See that? Nice, right?" fashion. He later went on to brag that he ordered the largest arrangement of everyone in attendance. Story 47. Mandatory Staff Appreciation Day. We are encouraged to come in on our day off with the promise of getting paid for the party. They talked up how it was a 1970s theme, and it was going to be a lot of fun with games and such. My boss convinced me to grow out my sideburns and disco it up. For starters, I walk into work, and the idiot 20-somethings I worked with were all dressed as hippies. No disco, anything, all hippies. Then my boss is there, the two of us the only ones looking remotely disco, and he commences with the festivities. First, we did a PowerPoint presentation. Then he kicked off karaoke, for which he had pre-selected the songs and the participants. Then he told us all to line up and collect one ice cream sandwich each and return to work. Everyone was a disappointment that day, and I learned that I was Dwight in that office. Story 48. I worked for a radio station once, and we were hiring a new employee to do sales. Pretty much all of the afternoon, we were supposed to do job interviews to find a new salesperson. I was the sales manager, and in the interviews with me was the general manager. He was this big giant man, huge, sweaty, sloppy, super weird and uncouth, and I had gone over all the interview rules with him before, like stop asking how old people are, that's illegal. He was doing better. And then all of a sudden, this particular afternoon, he just went damn it all. He asked a lady if she was married and how long she was married for, and if they had kids, or if they were trying, heh. He asked a guy which branch of military service he was in and why he rented an apartment. Why, are you poor or something? When he asked a lady if she was a lesbian, I just sat there aghast. It was one of the most uncomfortable Michael Scott moments I have ever been a part of in my life. Story 49. Offered to give everyone in the office a 100 bill, but said the new receptionist had to sing in front of the entire company or nobody would get paid. She was mortified, but complied, and he went around handing out 100 bills. He then told everyone they had to post pictures of the money on Facebook and tell everyone he was the best boss, and he'd check Facebook to make sure. This was one of many awful things he did. Story 50. I organized a meal for my team on a holiday, and each member pitched in $10 for a total of $50. I, being their supervisor, leader pitched in $50 for a total of $100. My wife and I prepared the meal: BBQ ribs, corn on the cob, and a salad. It was a lot of food for a small team. Boss was informed of the plans with plenty of time, and he had confirmed participation and even told me he'd help out with the money. He showed up, ate, took some home, never pitched in. Story 51. Currently pregnant. These are the Emma's comments from him. "You sure you don't have 2 babies in there?" "Hoo-ah," makes round belly motions with his hands and arms. "No, sir, just the one." "Well, you're clearly eating for 2. Happy baby? Om nom nom." "Yes, sir, happy baby." Rework this remark into every conceivable fashion and you've got my life for the last 10 weeks. I almost feel worse for my coworkers who have to listen to him try and rehash the same, "haha, so funny, you're pregnant" jokes every day. It's like he's never met a pregnant person before. Story 52. Don't remember the story exactly, but the guy's boss had a meeting begin with everyone saying their name, position, and where they were on the 11th of September. Story 53. Back in 2011, we had an earthquake here in the Mid-Atlantic. Office was on the 8th floor of a building, and when the earthquake started, he bolted for the exit stairs. Women and subordinates be damned. Story 54. My old manager was like the Israeli Michael Scott. We worked in a shoe store. He would often use the stuffing from shoes sold and with marker and staples fashion them into animals, mythical creatures. Then just leave them in the till drawer or around the back room. Miss that guy got me a birthday card too. Story 55. A coworker told me this story. She was one of 4 women working for a 10-person architecture firm that was struggling. Everyone was called in for an early meeting before work. And when they all showed up, there were a ton of cakes and coffee and donuts. Their boss instructed them not to touch any of it, and that he needed to have some brief one-on-one meetings first. He calls in one woman. 5 minutes later, she comes out with a look of disbelief, clears her desk, and says she was fired and goes home. A second woman gets called in. Same thing, goes home. The third woman gets called in. Same thing, goes home. Then the same thing happened to my coworker. Now, the whole firing all the women thing isn't necessarily a Michael Scott thing. But the fact that the boss of a struggling company bought a massive spread, laid it all out and told nobody to touch anything yet, then immediately fired 4 employees feels tone-deaf in a very Michael Scott way. Story 56. Took over our company's single largest customer. Was told they were running roughshod overproduction, demanding priority scheduling, etc. Was specifically told, you have to say no to them. Problem was, the first time I said no, they immediately called my boss. Instead of backing me up, he said, sure, we'll take care of it. In a related note, worst boss I ever had. Story 57. All the time, he would claim that the back was Vegas, meaning whatever happened there stayed there. He used that to justify his incredibly childish behavior, like sleeping on the job, throwing a tantrum when he actually had to work, pawning all his work off on others, or letting his favorite get out of her duties as well. He also started just leaving early, giving an excuse every time, but eventually stopped giving excuses and would just leave. Then when the branch president came downstairs one day and asked where he was, we all told him and he called him and made come back to the office, with 45 minutes left in the day. He pouted for weeks after that about how it wasn't fair that he had to stay late, when in fact he was staying his normal working hours, since the branch closed at 5. Story 58. We all went out to eat to celebrate an employee getting a promotion, on company time, and we were going to just split the bill. He gets the idea that he wants to buy like $30 worth of tater tots, separately. Kept going on about how this place had the best tater tots yada yada. So they barely even get touched and he is visibly angry. Everyone got fries with their lunch. Anyway, check comes and someone starts to split it. When he isn't paying attention and we work out that everyone owes 21 bucks. When he realized, he started freaking out and yelling because he was supposed to pay in $30 extra bucks and it was his gift to everyone and nobody but him should be responsible for the tots. All the money was already gathered though, so we just wanted to pay and leave. He makes everyone take their money back. After all that, he realizes he doesn't have enough to cash on him and the place didn't have an ATM. So he ends up paying an extra like 11 bucks. We have to collect the now 20 bucks back from everyone and we walk out and never speak of it again. Story 59 uses the term sexy to describe everything. Oh, this lamp I took from your desk without asking. It looks really sexy in my office, so I put it in there instead. The dog food logo we design needs to be dirty because that's what the client wants. Let's take some dirty photos of this toothpaste packaging for our website. Get some good angles. Story 60. A coworker asked me for some help with a personal errand. It was close to our break time, so we went out and got it done on our breaks. On the way back to the office, we hit the drive-thru, and he bought me lunch. We get back to the office with our burgers. The boss looks up and goes, "Where's mine?" We apologize, say we didn't think to bring one back for her. We then sit at our desks and eat out lunch. The next day, at around the same time, the boss disappears for a bit. She comes back with a bag from the same fast food place we went to the day before, sits at her desk, and starts eating a burger. She occasionally yells out, "Boy, oh boy, this is such a delicious burger, and I only got one for me, because we're selfish like that around here, aren't we?" My coworker just looks at me. Is she seriously having a revenge burger? Yes, she was. Also, we got her a card on her birthday. She tried to have us written up for not making a bigger fuss. Story 61. I came in on a typical Monday morning and found out my coworker Chris was out because his father had passed away over the weekend. My boss came up to me and asked, "Did you get that contract from Chris?" I told him that I had not. My boss paused and then looked at my office phone. Before I could tell him not to, he had picked up the phone and called Chris. He then put it on speakerphone and proceeded to ask him a bunch of questions that could have waited. Chris dutifully answered everything my boss needed to know, but you could hear the, "This is the last thing I should have to deal with right now," in his voice. It was then that I decided I needed to find another job. This is more of a season 1 oblivious, cringy Michael Scott than the fun-loving later seasons of Michael Scott. Story 62. It was like my first or second week. He asked me to come see his band, 3 middle-aged guys playing covers of blues rock bands, play at a sports bar. I told him I had to pick up my parents from the airport on the night in question. He told me they should get a cab. Story 63. My mother swears that the writers from The Office were in her office in the late 90s. The most Michael Scott story I've heard from her is the boss, whose name was Scott, was throwing a football around the office. As the velocity of the ball escalated, so did the pleas for Scott to stop throwing the football. Eventually, they all ended up hitting someone smack dab in the face, and the game was over. The person who got hit in the face? Al Franken, in between his stint at SNL and his stint in Congress. Story 64. Old boss brought in probably a dozen big poinsettia plants around the holidays, maybe more. They were everywhere. Arranged them all around the entrance to the office. He did this all without saying a word to us. We kind of look at one another and shrug. The dude likes poinsettias. Fine. About a week later, they were all in pretty bad shape. He walks in toward the bullpen area of the office in a huff and exclaims, "Guys, these plants are all dying! How come nobody's been watering these?" Story 65. We are a medium-sized company in a business that is dominated by two huge companies. We had a meeting where we had to present products to arguably the largest distributor in the world. My boss is at that meeting, as is my coworker who is presenting. Big boardroom with major players are there, and it's a big deal for us. My boss is on his laptop during the meeting. Not a huge deal, but he should be paying attention. Mid-sentence, and out of nowhere, my boss kind of yells, "Yes!" My coworker stops and immediately asks, "You have something to say?" in the most friendly way possible. My boss replies, "No, sorry, Manny just slid safe into third. He was watching the Red Sox game." Story 66. My last boss once closed the store early, so we would go to an escape room with him, and then we all went out drinking after. Team building exercise. We also had our own bowling league. He would also constantly set his tea mug on your desk and forget about it while chatting. When you brought it back to him, he'd just toss it back in the microwave after another excuse to chat for 20 minutes. He heated up the same cup of tea at least 4 times a day. This isn't a business, it's my work family. It was pretty adorable, and he was a very nice guy. I enjoyed working there, but we never got anything done. Story 67. My former boss brought in a massive amount of corn, still in the husk. One day, with no explanation, left it in the break room and then sent several emails throughout the day urging everyone to take some home. Then his assistant was sending emails about how gorgeous this corn was and how they were taking a bunch home and everyone else should too. It was like Michael Scott in Bonus Dwight. Story 68. My boss had a quirky sense of humor. Once he sent me a scathing email with a laundry list of things I'd supposedly done wrong and an accompany list of ridiculous ways to fix them, followed by a JK at the bottom. I chalked up the "just kidding" to his Michael Scottish humor and ignored the email. Turns out the JK at the bottom was actually his initials, and he was completely serious. Oops. Story 69. I had a boss at a privately owned marketing firm who was obsessed with Mad Men. She wanted to be the female Dawn Doctor. She had a business blog and would write extensively about how she was a woman on the rise in a man's world. The problem was, marketing is a fast-changing world, and she was not adapting to the game. She had terrible management skills, had no idea how to bill for work, but always maintained that she was the next big thing in the business world. We had maybe 3 clients. It was still a pretty fun gig because she encouraged us to have 2 o'clock happy hour at our desks. And it was my job to surround her blog posts with images of whiskey glasses and martinis. She continually asked me to make our work go viral, and was always really pleased when I said that I did. So many delusions of grandeur, it was like watching threat level Midnight Live every day. But the business is still going strong thanks to old family money. Story 70. Working as a developer and performance engineer, we had to stress test our software. This involved running tests that generated result files in a not very user-friendly format. So we manually had to go through them, manually compiling the results, and then publishing the results on the network. While my boss was on vacation, I took it upon myself to create a piece of software that took the raw performance files as input and generated the final report as HTML. The team seemed to really like it. When my boss got back from vacation, he asked what I had been working on, and I told him about the utility. He wasn't happy that I had wasted my time on non-performance related things. A couple of hours after our little talk, he em'd me that the utility didn't work. It just fails. Turns out he was feeding it the output HTML files. Story 71. My director fired a girl who sat next to me. On her last day, he threw her a pizza party. Yes, he threw her a party for her termination. He asked her what kind of pizza she liked. Her response was, "She doesn't eat pizza." He threw the party anyway. She left before it started. Story 72. Yesterday, my boss at our local pool, also named Michael, jumped into the pool in front of my chair and screamed, "I'm drowning." I had to jump in, save him, and he was fighting me the whole time while laughing. He kept trying to push me away from the wall when I brought him up to it. He then made me backboard him like he had a neck injury while fighting me. After struggling to get my huge boss to the side, I got a few guards on the side of the pool to grab him, and I got out and walked away. I later threatened to quit when he walked up, do it again later that day. Story 73. At the office Christmas party of about 100 people, we had a 10-minute video of the management team dressed in Christmas sweaters in front of a winter background singing songs to the tune of popular Christmas carols. There were a half-dozen songs where the lyrics were some inside joke about the company that very few people outside of them knew. None of them were singers. It was 10 minutes of uncomfortable chuckles while everyone hoped that this was the last song. Most of the office gatherings were high on the cringe scale, but this was the peak. Much like Michael, my boss always meant well, but awkward and uncomfortable was his gift. This was all years before The Office. I sometimes thought that some of the office party scenes were sourced from actual events I witnessed. Story 74, paraphrasing. If there is some confusion about what people should be working on, I deliberately don't step in to clear it up. They'll figure it out eventually. Story 75. The guy who owns the company, who thought I was under 18 because I have a baby face, took a selfie with me on the first day a few months later. He gave me and his PA a lift home and told us all about these clients who really wanted to duck him. Sure. The kicker, though, is the time he saw me and yelled, "Hey, I'm taking your grandma out to dinner tonight. Going to get her wasted." Yeah, he knew my grandmother and thought all of this was a totally cool and normal way to behave. Story 76. I worked as security guard for Microsoft in Amsterdam. The day in question, my boss had management over from Redmond and was speaking English to them with a horrible, incomprehensible accent. He told his female superior she had nice breasts by saying nice tatas. When she spewed fire in return, he quickly decided against his latest actions and claimed he meant tattoos by that. She only had a music note tattoo on her hand. Needless to say, this was all too amusing for my coworkers and I. Story 77. Told a very large client that we had 200 subject matter experts to assist us in developing our material they contracted for. There were 5 of us in the company, 2 of us straight out of college, and 0 subject matter experts. Surprise, surprise. The client wasn't happy with what we gave them, tried to not pay, and then settled for about 30% of the amount, which happily was enough to make payroll current. It was late, and then I quit. The same boss also threatened to hit his ex-wife, and, unrelated believe it or not, had armed federal marshals come looking for him on the one day he was having a bender and wasn't in the office. Story 78. CEO of our company Skyped into a meeting, but accidentally hit his laptop screen and aimed the camera down, revealing he was Skyping in with the classic no pants style. It was like a real-life sitcom moment. Story 79. My boss one time had a visit from corporate and told me to hide him in the safe, and if they asked me where he was, I was supposed to say he's at lunch. They called him, and they heard the ringing from inside the safe. Story 80. Boss took our team out for lunch as a holiday party time event. We had assumed, because it was corporate culture, that he was picking up the check. But when the bill came, he asked the waitress to split it up among each of us. We were still speechless when he handed out our holiday surprise, which turned out to be gift certificates for $10 to a restaurant just down the street from where we were sitting. Story 81. He pulled me and all of the other young married women aside at work to let us know that it would be a bad time for any of us to get pregnant if we were thinking about it. Story 82. Threw an awards party for the division at a local restaurant, assuming that they would be take parties of more than 15 to the separate room. Didn't call ahead to book that room. So from 5 different tables, we received awards as she avoided servers and diners and worked the room. What is the most Michael Scott thing your boss has ever done? Part 2. Just the constant use of buzzwords and corporate speak to sound like she's important while saying nothing. Well, we're going to need to pull the trigger on this or we're not going to have a synergistic approach, was said recently. Story 2. This is my dad's boss, not mine. My dad went to a credit union conference and his boss, the CEO, got up on stage and sang a Harry Chapin song and started crying and then walked off. True story. Story 3. My former boss just got a promotion and left our workplace. He bought himself a going-away full-size sheet cake, 80 servings. He cut off a small corner at his going-away party, and then proceeded to close the cake box and take home the other 79 servings instead of sharing any of it with anyone. He was a really good boss, and I will miss him, but that was pretty typical of him too. Story 4. Told the most inappropriate joke to me at work, in front of about 10 people. What do you call nuts on your chest? Chestnuts? What do you call nuts on a wall? Walnuts. What do you call nuts on your chin? I don't know. A junk in your mouth. Awkwardness throughout the whole room ensues. Story 5. Someone from corporate came in to teach us on racism, sexual harassment, etc. My boss thought it would be a good idea to interrupt the presentation and ask us for personal testimonies of time when we felt uncomfortable in the workplace. When no one answered, she called out a coworker and asked how she felt that everyone thought she was fat and makes fun of her when she comes back with fast food every day for lunch. The coworker of mine just sat there and started to cry. My boss was like, well, I thought she knew, and proceeded to point out all the office gossip and what everyone felt about each other. Story 6. A bunch of years ago, I worked at a PetSmart that had a very Michael Scott-esque GM. In the middle of our shift one day, he calls all the staff up to the front door of the store where the floor mat has worked its way out into the path of the automatic doors and is keeping them from closing. Standing on the mat, he looks at us and very seriously says, "We have a problem, guys. I've been here since we opened this morning, and this is the 4th time that this floor mat has moved out into the path of the door. Now, does anybody know what this means?" Nobody pipes up for this because it's clearly bait for him to tell someone that they're wrong. This means that we have more people leaving the store than we have coming in. The reason that we have more people leaving the store than we have coming in is because we're not providing the best customer service. Once we start doing that, we'll have more people coming in than leaving. Now I want you guys to put on your best customer service, and by closing tonight, I want to see this floor mat against the back wall of the store. Okay. Story 7. Gathered everyone in the office kitchen to demonstrate exactly how he liked his coffee made, but pitched it as if he was letting everyone in on the secret to making the perfect coffee, and we'd all be thankful to him later. He proceeds to make a completely damn normal instant coffee in pretty much the only way it's possible to make it. Story 8. He has fallen asleep while speaking with me and signing some paperwork. Then when I woke him, played it off like nothing happened. Regularly spills coffee all over himself. Hung up on his daughter while she was telling him over the phone she was accepted to medical school with nothing more than an okay, bye. Gets out of confrontational conversations with other department heads and clients by mumbling incoherently or with irrelevant statements. They usually don't know how to respond, and he just sort of slinks out of it. The list goes on. These aren't all Michael Scott-like things, just quirks. He's not a fan of headsets. Doesn't like how they feel. Has fairly loud conference calls in our open concept office. Almost constantly looks disheveled. Shirt buttons misaligned or not all buttoned. Pants tucked into socks. Suit jacket collar folded under itself. Fly undone, etc. Regularly spills yogurt on himself. Forgets that he told you to do something, then gets irritated when you do that thing. Sometimes responds to generic company-wide emails with reply all. Often providing hilarious and personal information to approx.1000 people. A while back, he informed everyone of his plate number and car model when reminded to update parking info with reception. Once got a bit tipsy at a company afternoon soiree, meet and greet after having 2 cups of wine. We witnessed him then stare at his untied shoe for a solid 2 minutes. Story 9. My boss gave herself an award and proceeded to show it off to everyone higher up than her. Never thought this would be so popular. So here's an edit to add clarification, more information. Without going into specifics, I work for a department at a college, university, and my boss, who is the director of our department, also is the president of a volunteer organization that works in conjunction with higher education for our field. Any obligations for this volunteer organization are to be conducted outside of standard operating hours. Yet half of my office, we're small, so 3 out of 6 people, spend hours of our work time running this organization in her stead. So basically, the award she received was for exceptional and outstanding contributions to volunteer organization. Story 10. Got a pay rise, and then decided on the spot to vote for the UK's right-wing party, instead of the left-wing party he had voted for 30 years, because I've got more money now. Story 11. I work at a Fortune 500 company. In the middle of an important meeting, which was based around my boss, she leans over to me and whispers, I'm organizing a flash mob for later this year. I want you to be a part of it. Story 12. My grandfather passed away back in February. I flew back east for the funeral, and when I got back, my boss was talking to me to see how everything went and touch base. The extent of the conversation was this. Boss, how was the funeral? Me. About what you'd expect from a funeral. It was a nice service. Boss, did you see the body? Me. Yes. Story 13. When he pages someone over the intercom, he instructs them to report to the senior vice president's office, instead just saying, please come to Gary's office. We have like 20 people that work here. Everyone knows it's him when he starts the page. He likes hearing his own voice and title. Story 14. My old boss once talked to me loudly about how he didn't understand how tampons worked. Then when I provided a perfunctory explanation, exclaimed that the only thing women should be using there are junks. Story 15. Trying to pick the company health insurance policy, so he polls the leadership team for input at an executive all-hands. CEO states that we're all young and healthy, so no one needs things like dental or optical. Half of our executive team is wearing glasses. He moves on. Story 16. My boss is Michael Scott. He even looks like Steve Carroll. He tries so hard to be the entertainer. I keep a running list to tell my wife. I'll list some examples here, but have to withhold some stories because they're too specific and can be routed back to me. His first meeting as boss, he put up a picture of Donald Trump on the PowerPoint and went into a Trump impression, saying, we're going to make department great again, and continued saying Trump things like "yug" or "beautiful thing." There were only 4 of us in the room. It went on for an uncomfortable amount of time with no one laughing. No joke. His impression lasted 3 or 4 minutes with all of us awkwardly smiling and wishing he would move on. He tells inappropriate stories all the time that go on for so long, without any idea they are inappropriate. Like how when he was young, he used to tease his friend for going out with girls. Or how he loved to change his old coworkers' wallpapers to adult film. He loves to recount stories to you of other times. He did something he considered funny, like a funny remark he made in a meeting or something. The stories are so long, but he always makes it sound like he was killing it. He's used the terms everyone roared with laughter in moments I am sure are not true. An actual example is someone's last name was Towns, and he goes, what's his mother's maiden name? Village? The problem with listening to him recount his funny moments is that it takes forever to get the story over with. He tells you every detail, including the first and last name of everyone there. Anytime New York comes up, we have a lot of night customers. He goes into a wise guy accent, starts going New York and use guys. I sit next to my boss. The day I realized it was like working with Michael Scott was one day during my first 3 months when he was not in the office. It was easily the most productive day I ever had. I should mention he is very high up in the leadership ladder. Overall, good guy though. Story 17. He hired some random migrant farm workers to fix an authentic Mexican dinner for our office Christmas party. I grew up working alongside migrant farm workers in the Midwest detasseling corn. They eat poor people food just like the rest of the working poor in the rural Midwest. So I knew this was going to be hilarious. I was not disappointed when he asked them what a certain delicious, cheesy pasta dish they served us was called, and they answered mac and cheese casserole. Story 18. He put a large caution, "Surface is hot," sticker on the Denim Ed Dad butt, came into my office, shook his fanny at me, and asked what I thought of his safety signage. This may sound like harassment, but just like I can't imagine Michael Scott actually being a predator, I couldn't imagine my boss being one. This reminded me of when Michael wore his lady's power suit to the office and showed off the backside. Story 19. Oh boy, where do I begin? Some of these are Michael Scott. Some are just plain weird. He's directing a movie about the mafia. He has money, so it's actually decently shot and the acting is okay, but the story is so cookie cutter. He thinks it's incredibly original. He's also been getting into music the past few years with Berklee online courses. So he's been using his skills to score his own movie. He's very confident in his skills, but shouldn't be. He's writing a book on financial fraud. He's a forensic accountant professor, so this actually makes sense. And he was having me help him edit it with the editor's notes. I'm a data analyst, so this makes less sense. He kept trying to shoehorn in his political views on Obama and Hillary. I remember one editor note that your disdain for current politicians and Democratic Party are now actively discrediting your book. You have to stop. He'll go to the bathroom and then start a conversation with people outside the bathroom as he's peeing. He's a little scatterbrained. I work at an accounting firm and on occasion want the okay or confirmation for a schedule I made that it's what he needed. One time I showed him one and he couldn't follow it. So I went back, but a thick border around the important parts, and he told me it was perfect. People at my office now refer to the practice of highlighting the important parts as J-boxing. After I shared this story with them, my boss's name starts with a J and boxing for the thick border box trick I used. We once had a company BBQ at his house since he has a nice backyard pool. His wife came home and apparently had no idea this was going to happen that day. During the school semester, he would take naps at work before he went into college. One time he fell asleep with a cup of coffee in his hand. There's now a huge stain on the kitchen carpet. There are others I just need time to think. Story 20. I am a teacher, and my school principal can be incredibly Michael Scott-like. One example includes, the day before Christmas vacation, students had just taken semester finals and had a half day of school. Teachers were swamped with grading. The finals and grades were, of course, due the following afternoon. After the students left for their half day, teachers were told we would have a quick meeting followed by scheduled time to grade our assessments. Much to our relief, the meeting appeared short, and most of the afternoon was scheduled for grading. When we got to the meeting, however, our principal excitedly announced that the whole afternoon schedule had been a lie and that we must all cover our eyes and walk to the science lab. After reluctantly following these bizarre instructions, we all found ourselves in what my principal called Winter Wonderland, where we would spend the next 3 hours participating in a gingerbread building contest. She locked us in, told us she would be back to judge at the end of the day, and left. Story 21. Remodeled our break room with a $4,000 fridge, ping pong table, espresso machine, and old arcade. After the red ribbon cutting party, he announced due to the tight budget, we wouldn't be getting our Christmas bonuses. Story 22. Boss wanted to give his tie to one of my co-workers before a meeting to look more professional. The company we were meeting with don't wear ties. Our company doesn't wear ties. Both companies know this. My coworker was wearing a lumberjack-style shirt, so my boss wanted him to wear a formal tie with a short-sleeved lumberjack-style shirt to look more professional. Story 23. One time, my boss told an entire room that he had a soft spot for drunk drivers because if it weren't for a drunk driver killing his mother's first husband, then he never would have been born. Also, his nickname was a slang term for ejaculating. When one of our clients finally told him what it meant, he refused to stop using it as a nickname because it was his name first. Really nice guy, though, and it was fun to have him as my first boss. Story 24. I was in the military on a special projects team. They wanted a bunch of new recruits to work on this project and gave us some nice benefits while doing so. Basically, with a budget of $10,000, we were to design and build a UAV. No sergeants allowed, and the highest officer rank was captain. Our team was 1 captain, 2 LUTs, and 2 senior airmen. The caption was Michael Scott to AT. He was so socially awkward he didn't know how to talk to us as a group. So he would wait and pin us down in the hall on our way from the bathroom. It got to the point where we started to moo, as in like the cow, if we were ever alone in the hallways and we knew we were about to get pinned. This way, anyone else who heard the moo could come get the person trapped with some really important thing to look at. The moo thing was supposed to be like a hard mentality or something, while the capped was the farmer leading us to slaughter. It doesn't make much sense now, but it was hilarious then. The real Michael Scott part was after the first couple of months. Project was 5 months long. The capped would occasionally moo with us, having absolutely no idea that this was a call to be saved from him. Our superiors caught on halfway through the project that he was a complete idiot, and he was all but removed from the team at that point. As I understand it, it ruined his career. And last I heard, he left the military in an attempt to become a state trooper. I think he failed the psych eval, though. I've got quite a few stories of the capped. He was quite the source of entertainment throughout that whole project. Story 25. Right after college, I worked in a car dealership in the service department for about 10 months. There were about 6 techs, 2 service advisors, the service manager, 2 parts guys, and me, only girl, had worked in car dealerships and service at home all through college. I got a job as the warranty admin, cashier, office assistant. It paid. My boss, the service manager, was a total douche, and I often felt like seasons 1, 3 Pam in that job. Imagine a roided-up metalhead bro, but shaved bald. Never married, lived in a house owned by his grandparents. Drank double Red Bull vodkas at the bowling alley, which was the only place in town with a smoking bar. Referred to his truck as my $40,000 truck, but had to borrow money from one of our technicians to pay his car payment each month. I could tell stories for a long time, but this is the most Michael Scott event. Our dealership was one of the ones with the drive-in lanes with the big garage doors. There were some display tires stored at the front, and one day we heard a chirping. There were some birds that nested in the rafters, and one of the adolescent birds had fallen out of the nest and onto the tire covers. Other birds are nowhere to be found. Service manager finds the bird, and that became the focus of the day. He had to save it. He carried it, barehanded, into his office, held it in his fist, and stroked its head. The bird was kind of panting, which is a sign of distress, as per the internet, but he said it was smiling at him. He named the bird Van Halen. My task that day was to raid the parts department for a box, rags, soft stuff to make a nest box for it. He sent the valet to the convenience store 4 miles away to buy a bucket of bait, so it had food. Mind you, the worms were pretty much bigger than this bird. He then decided he wanted to teach the bird how to fly. So he put the bird box nest on his desk and spent about 15 minutes standing on a chair in his office and jumping onto the floor. He kept calling the bird his best friend. He spent all day talking to the bird. All day long, the bird is showing signs of distress. Near the end of the day, he decided to let the bird go and he took it outside. The moment the bird was placed on the asphalt of the back lot, it blasted into the nearest shrub and hid. Service manager spent a good 15 minutes rustling in the shrubbery, trying to find that poor bird so he could say a proper goodbye. The bird didn't come back out. When he came back in, he spent the end of the day talking about how he thinks he'd make a good dad. Remember the episode of The Office where they see the video of Michael as a kid on that show and he talks about how he wants to have kids so they'll be his friends and it's supremely sad? It was like that. Story 26. Not really a Michael Scott moment, but I have the Intech coffee mug. My boss regularly uses it and has very similar Bill Lumber mannerisms. I let him borrow office space once because I thought he'd find it funny. He brought it back Monday morning and said he could only get through the first 20 minutes. Didn't find it funny. Story 27. The CEO called a company-wide meeting with no details provided. We were all to meet in the auditorium for a big announcement. People were damn freaked out. Like, what the heck is going on? Did he sell the company? Do we have jobs? What the heck? Everyone shuffles in and the CEO and the half a dozen other execs are at the front of the room. We had a record-breaking year. Help yourself to some sodas and cake. Also, I'm taking the executive staff to the Bahamas as a reward. We'll be out of the office next week. Weakest round of applause I've ever heard. Story 28. We had a zone manager, basically my immediate supervisor's supervisor, for a couple of years who was a real character. A real good old boy. Hank Hill by way of Foghorn Leghorn kind of personality. Reminded me of Governor Pappy O'Daniel. From O, brother, where? Art, thou? There was always something wonderfully goofy about that man. During department meetings, he would frequently pepper his motivational speeches with old country folk, sayings that left everyone in attendance thinking, huh? Some of my favorites included, but were in no way limited to, he's so dumb he couldn't pour piss out of a boot with the instructions on the heel. I need this done faster than a knife fight in a phone booth. She could start an argument in an empty house. I'll keep this short today. I feel like I've been hit by a wolf and crap off a cliff. Her skirt was so short I could almost see the promised land. It's drier in here than a popcorn's fart. Speaking of farts, he soon developed a reputation for his tendency to be extremely candid about his own gassy outbursts. More than once, he would pull you over to explain a project and then warn you, Just so you know, I had some sauerkraut with my lunch today, so don't get offended if I leave the room abruptly or anything. At other times, he might announce his farts to us by saying, "Here comes another good one. Y'all ready?" And afterwards, appraise them on their stench and robustness. His better efforts usually left him exclaiming, "Woo, that one knock a buzzard off a gut wagon." When he wasn't gassing us out of the building or grinding our brains to a halt with his southern platitudes, he was distinguishing himself in other ways, such as devising convoluted, time-consuming projects that took days to complete, only to ultimately decide he didn't like some minor detail and make us start all over from scratch. Making hasty, spur-of-the-moment adjustments to our departments he would quickly forget about, and then days later would be on a tirade about the very things he himself had corrected. Wondering who the idiot was who had set it up like that, holding vendors and customers hostage while he regaled them with lengthy rants and diatribes about politics and sports teams. And just generally displaying an uncanny aptitude for finding creative ways to lose or damage company equipment. All in all, a confusing, chaotic time at the job, but one I look back on with a strange fondness. Story 29. Here are a couple things from one boss I had. He would also bring the birthday boy out for lunch and spring for his check anytime someone had a birthday, which was cool. All male at department, so no need to douchey. I once asked for a day off by email, and he replied, "Contain, Three Stooges." It was season 2 where Michael Scott would do an impression, then quietly say who the impression was of. He decided to promote individuals in different sections to team lead. One morning I could see him hovering outside our office while our new team lead gave me some negative feedback that was obviously from my boss, but he didn't want to be the bad guy. Story 30. This isn't so terrible, but the lack of social awareness did remind me of Michael Scott. I was in a department meeting with the vice president of my department as well as the rest of my team. During the meeting, my vice president starts to talk about something, and out of the blue, she randomly turns her chair, looks to me, and excitedly asks, "Are you on Facebook?" To which I reply, "Yeah, of course I am." She immediately stops talking about our agenda items, logs onto Facebook, looks me up, and asks, "Orange Q's? Is this you?" My real name is quite unique, and so the odds that she would have found another person with my name was pretty slim. But it was even more odd that my profile picture was clearly of my face. In any case, she added me as a friend and looked at me for a good 5 seconds before asking, "So, are you going to accept my request or what?" So I asked her if she wanted me to do so right at that moment, to which she replied, "Yes." This was several years ago before I had the Facebook app on my smartphone, and so she slid her laptop over to me, had me log on, and accept her request on the spot. She then went onto my page, started to look through my page to see what kind of fun photos I had. I made things private, and so she couldn't see a lot of my personal photos. Not that I had anything to hide, just that she probably would have shown them to my entire department during the meeting. The whole thing was super weird. She was so happy about it the entire time, and she had zero awareness that it was inappropriate and flat out weird to do during a meeting at work. Story 31. My old boss knew we were all stressed and overworked, so he thought that the best way to get us to relax was to have a drum circle in the middle of the office while we were all trying to work. He kept trying to get people to join in, even people who were on the phone. Eventually, it was just him sitting on the floor hitting drums. Story 32. Not my boss, but an instructor at a driver improvement course definitely could have used the diversity day lesson. The class was mostly teenagers with speeding tickets. And in the row I was sitting in there was a young black girl, me, a white girl, and then a white boy between us. At one point, the instructor called to the boy and asked which one of us he was going for, the white girl, or you got jungle fever. Sigh. Story 33. My boss is like Michael Scott's weird brother. He regularly asks me and my coworkers to set him up on dates, holds meetings, and by meetings, it's him going through his profiles so we can help judge the girls. If he's on the phone with someone and doesn't wish to continue the conversation, he will make a weird comment like, "I gotta go, but let's talk later when you're in my basement after I kidnap you." If you're eating lunch, he'll stand behind you and stare at your food until you offer him some, which he will then reach onto your plate and start touching all your food to find the perfect fry. We'll answer all questions in an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. There's 1,000 more things he does that are so cringy, and I could go on and on update. My boss and I are attending the same wedding and placed at the same table. He told me not to think of him as my boss, but as my party buddy. He also said he just wants us to, and I'm quoting directly, let loose, maybe get drunk, dance, we could even do substances together. Story 34. I was told the following in my yearly review. You did everything we asked of you, but not the things we didn't ask of you. It was said in a very critical tone. Story 35. Pretty simple, really. I had 2 projects due at the same time, so I asked my boss about priority. He yelled at me. They're both the priority. He didn't last long running our department. Of course, as has been said, if you don't know the Michael Scott in your office, then it's likely you're the Michael Scott. Story 36. My girlfriend's boss literally fake fired her, just like in the first season episode. Brotherina told her that she didn't pass her recertification training and that she would be immediately terminated. She started crying and panicking. Sure enough, he started laughing and said, "Just kidding." Story 37. When I first graduated law school and was working at a firm, they had just required everyone to have a smartphone. There was a meeting for which everyone was told to bring their phones, because they were going to teach everyone how to use them. This was mainly for the older attorneys. This one partner, who was probably 75 years old, is late to the meeting, and he yells for his assistant to come into his office. He couldn't figure out how to unplug his phone and bring it to the meeting. He was actually trying to unplug everything from his desk phone and bring it to the smartphone meeting. Story 38. In a meeting, he zoned out and was staring out the window. Someone asked what we should do for the new hire's initiation lunch, and he mindlessly said, "Take her to a field and leave her there." It reminded me of how Michael talked about Toby. Story 39. I work in a fine dining restaurant in a big city. My GM is like Michael Scott in the wants to help everyone and make them happy way, and less in the cringe OMG stop kind of way. During our slow months, our restaurant closes at 3 and we don't open for dinner. One time this winter, we had a couple that made a reservation for 3. The hostess who took the rees was new and didn't realize she should let anyone know. The nice couple showed up on time, but since it had been a slow day and we didn't expect any more customers past our pathetic lunch rush that day, the chef had left at about 2:50. My GM was super apologetic to the couple and came up with a solution. He asked about their diet restrictions, then called another restaurant in our company. He drove them there through 3:30 traffic on a Friday and had an entire 3-course meal set up when they got there. Everything was comped. When I first started working there, I was like, is this guy for real? He's too nice. Then he did that, and I realized that's just the way he is. Super nice guy. Story 40. I was a young entry-level employee, and my boss invited me and another guy on my team to a birthday party at his apartment. I was 22, and he must have been about 35. My friend and I went out of obligation with our SOS. And when we got there, it was only us, my boss and his boyfriend, 6 people. In his small Manhattan apartment, we barely knew each other. He put dinner in the oven to cook about 45 minutes after we got there. So the whole affair lasted hours. It was excruciating. The whole thing was pretty similar to an actual Office episode, but it happened a few years earlier. Story 41. Not so much Michael Scott, but the cringe was the same. Worked for the American arm of a large Japanese company, and our president was from Japan. He understood English pretty well, but he couldn't speak it at all. He'd try, but it was nearly possible to understand, so he never said much beyond good morning to anyone. His right-hand man and his secretary were always on hand to translate if he actually wanted to say something important. So we have this huge, fancy Christmas party, and we were in this elegant ballroom on the Queen Mary. One of the nitwits in HAR decided that it would be great if the president could say a few words. 500 employees plus spouses all watching him with trepidation as he walks up to the podium. He looks around the room, takes a very long, uncomfortable pause, and says, "Imagine the most stereotypical Hollywood Mr. Miyagi accent ever. I feel like Octopus in Escort House. I don't know where to start." Story 42. This is probably much worse than Michael Scott. My female friend and I worked in a telemarketing office when we were 18. The boss was in a good mood and during a break was telling jokes the one day. He asks my friend if she knows the 3 Nelsons. She says no, so he tells her to turn around and he says, "There's the half Nelson." Puts her in a half Nelson, 1 arm lock. "There's the full Nelson." Puts her in a full Nelson, 2 arm lock behind your head. "And the father Nelson," and slams her. Now my friend was a goofy chick and pretty weird, so she, although shocked, laughed it off and genuinely thought it was funny. But man, butt slamming an employee, he's real lucky she thought it was funny. Everyone else had to pick their jaws up off the floor. Story 43, the episode where Jim drew a pie chart of how Michael spends his time. 80% distracting others, 19% procrastination, and 1% critical thinking. Really sums up my boss nicely. He lives across the country and does not spend much time in our office. But we all groan whenever he announces an upcoming trip to our office because productivity approaches 0 whenever he is around. He views his trips to our office as party time away from his family. He will frequently schedule meetings. The entire office is expected to attend, where he will gloat about some trip he took recently, or show us all the PowerPoint he presented to his daughter's 5th grade class. He always wants to have office happy hours and boozy dinners while he is in town, and will get offended when people don't attend because they either have plans or do not want to get drunk on a Tuesday night. My boss also jokes that he is writing a book titled Micromanage for Mega Results whenever his micromanaging and hovering impedes our work efficiency. Story 44. I love my boss, and he's a high school history teacher on weekends. There are also a pair of twin babies that live in our building. Whenever he sees them, he picks them up and recites the Gettysburg Address in the hopes that it'll be their first memory. Story 45. It's not exactly something Michael Scott would do, but similar. Anyways, my first job out of college was working for a really big mortgage company. And my boss at the time was really out of touch. He always tried to be cool whenever he could so people would like him. This was right around the time the movie Office Space came out, BTW. So one random day, a guy on my team stood up and jokingly announced to the floor, "Remember guys, next Friday is Hawaiian shirt day. So, if you want to, go ahead and wear a Hawaiian shirt and jeans." Well, lo and behold, my boss showed up the next Friday wearing a Hawaiian shirt with jeans. He was really surprised that no one else did the same thing. Story 46. Once yelled at me because I was trying to explain something a little technical and she refused to learn technology. "If I tell you to call Google so they'll put us on the Google homepage, then you call Google." Story 47. He'd play all these motivational videos during meetings. That's all he did. That's all I remember in my time with him. All of us would be stuffed in this small conference room to watch motivational videos. Not even some video about some professor of something giving advice on group work or anything. It was those cringy videos of birds flying in groups or malnourished dogs becoming healthy again with layover text, and emotional music playing in the background. I don't know where the heck he finds them, but every time it's something different, and they play for more than half an hour. He'd speak out in the middle. "I like this one. Watch this." Or look at us as if expecting approval. And at the ends, that's it. You go back to work. No numbers. Nothing about targets or what we need in the office. As if we were supposed to get a stat boost from just watching videos. Story 48. Called me in the middle of the night, says he got stuck out in Vegas if I could go pick him up about a 400-mile drive. I said that's fine, but he had to pay for gas. So I start getting ready. Called me back. Said he just wanted to check if I had his back and was at home. Mind you, this was about 1 in the morning. Didn't complain as he gave me a 100 gas card for bothering me. Story 49. It doesn't quite fit, but one week he claimed Friday was going to be Seersucker Friday. Of course, no one but him wore seersucker. But instead of being awkward, he damn owned it with the exact right combination of self-deprecating humor and cockiness. By the end of the day, we were all a little jealous. Story 50. After getting his first girlfriend in the 4 years he'd worked there, he brought up the topic of sex randomly in work conversation, and then asked my fellow subordinates and I if we'd ever been told to stop mid-sex because our partner had become too sensitive after a while. He asked it in a, "That's happened to you guys, right?" sort of way. It was so obvious he was talking about his new girlfriend that we'd all just met, so we tried to play it off. "Yeah, I think that's happened before, sure." One of my female coworkers stood firm. "Nah, man, I don't think that's a thing." To which my boss responded, "Well, I took it as a compliment." For the next half hour, he'd randomly repeat out loud to whoever was listening, "Well, I took it as a compliment." It wasn't. Story 51. In the first month of my then new boss's tenure, he stood in the doorway to my office and told, at great length and in great detail, a story of how over the weekend he was pretty sure he'd seen a UFO. Not only had he seen the UFO, but he had reported it to the National UFO Database thing. He finishes this 15-minute monologue on the UFO, colors, height, movement pattern, etc., with the statement, "Turns out it was just a drone with a camera for filming the fireworks," and then turns and walks away. Story 52. The it guy was late, so he sat at his desk and used his desk phone to call random people in the office, impersonating him using his Asian trying to speak English accent, and proceeded to make everyone feel unconformable with the questions he asked. "Hi, Sarah. Do you think I'm good looking, just wondering? Hi, John. I found adult film on your computer. This is not allowed anymore, okay?" Every single person fell for it. Story 53. My dad's boss once said he would give all employees something to boost encouragement in the workplace. They all got camo baseball hats with "Get R Done" written on them. Story 54. He spilled coffee on his shoes and it soaked into his socks. So what does he decide to do? He washes his sock by hand in the kitchen sink, then attempts to dry it off in the microwave set on high for a minute. The wet sock just sat there and spun around trying to burn, but it was too wet. The horrible smell of burning, sweaty sock filled the entire office for a week. To better top things off, he then sent out a say-over email telling everyone in the office to only use the microwave for food. I sat there watching all of this go down while providing honest Jim Halpert-like advice. Story 55. He wanted me to feel comfortable in the office. So he gathered the team, introduced me, and invited everyone to ask whatever questions they had about my disability or wheelchair. No one said a word. So this idiot starts peppering me with questions such as, can you have sex? How do you use the bathroom? Can you dress yourself? And my favorite, do you use the wheelchair at home or do you have a sling and tracks on the ceiling? This was intended to make my new colleagues more comfortable around a disabled person. Story 56. Pooped his pants at work. Apparently, he had food poisoning or something. After the shameful act occurred, he told his assistant manager exactly why he was leaving instead of just saying he was sick. Then, he got really paranoid that the staff would figure out why he was leaving. So he spent the next 15 minutes walking around in his poop-soaked pants saying goodbye and shaking everyone's hand, something he never did on a normal day. Naturally, after he left, everyone wondered why he was acting so weird, and the assistant manager eventually spilled the beans. Story 57. I work at an Applebee's, and across the street, a new restaurant opened up. On the first day they opened, we were almost completely empty, and my boss told me to go over and wait for a host there to approach me and tell him to do BJ. Story 58. We were all on a telecon with our DC office. My deputy chief was on his way to work and was calling in on his BlackBerry. He must have forgotten to mute it because in the middle of our chief talking, he starts ordering breakfast tacos. My chief was actually pretty cool about it, though. She told him that if he is going to be late because he stopped to get tacos, that he better bring in enough for the whole office. And he did. Story 59. There is a customer we all dislike. We saw him walking up to our storefront. My boss proceeded to jump under her desk. The customer asked if she was around. I tell him no, and he has this puzzled look on his face while looking behind me. I turn around to see my boss's hand coming up from under her desk roaming for her milkshake. He was not pleased. Story 60. During our morning store meeting, my manager had bought us donuts and milk. She told everyone to help themselves, then looks at me and says, "I got you 2% milk." I looked confused as duck as to why, and she explains, "Because you're lactose intolerant." Looks into camera. Story 61. Wore all black when he fired someone. He also announced at a staff meeting, "If you see me here in all black, I'm here to walk someone to the door," aka firing them. He damn wore black all the time just to duck with us. Story 62. A few years ago, my boss at the time let us go from work 15 minutes early. It wasn't that in of itself, it was how he acted about it, that he was some sort of hero. This was on a very slow day, and he definitely could have let everyone have a half day, which would have been awesome. Sure, 15 minutes gets you home a little earlier, but it's not like we would have so much more time to enjoy ourselves. Story 63. Work in a family law office. My boss regularly complains to everyone who comes in, new client or otherwise, about her husband. A person came in for a consultation one time because they wanted to get a restraining order against because they legitimately feared they could wind up murdered. My boss managed to steer the conversation into how her husband hadn't cleared off the back porch like he said he would. Much like Michael Scott, the looks of abject horror on these people's faces at this behavior doesn't even register. Story 64. Oh, well, you should have planned ahead. Response to me asking why none of my customers were informed I was on bereavement leave after I'd called 2 managers the day my relative died to say I needed the next week off, thus following company policy. My response, "No worries. I have no more grandparents to lose, so you're good." He just said, "Okay then," and wandered off. Apparently, several coworkers went to his office to berate him afterwards, and he's been very polite to me ever since. Story 65. When I was about 15 or 16, I was offered a stocking job at a pharmacy owned by a family friend. I didn't handle anything serious other than making sure the shelves were stocked and the place was clean. My boss was really awkward and would always laugh at jokes a few seconds after they were told. And she laughed just like Michael does when he's in awkward situations. She was always shredding important papers on accident and shouting, "No, no, no," in her back office too. Story 66. A coworker told our boss a story about her stepdaughter being called thick by a dude hitting on her at a child's birthday party where she was performing as a clown. I don't think our boss totally understood what it meant. My boss ended a training meeting with a 23-year-old temp by saying, "Hey, you a thick clown," with a huge, wasn't that hip and funny grin. The girl just went, okay, and left the room immediately. Luckily, she didn't, get him fired. Story 67. I work for a cell phone retailer. My manager is actually a Michael Scott. Just the other day, I was selling someone the new iPhone 6S when my manager steps in to just talk with the customer. It didn't take him 60 seconds to ask him what his opinion on abortion was. Needless to say, I lost a sale. The guy got too uncomfortable and left. Story 68. He said this with a straight face in all seriousness. "Let's turn all these busyness into reporting this so we can all look like rock stars." Cue blank stares and cricket silence until someone coughed and goes, "Sure, boss." Meeting adjourned. Story 69. My boss once picked up a bolt of fabric I had purchased and said, "I asked for royal blue." I held up the label on the packaging, which read, "Such and such royal blue." Felt boss responded, "Really?" Long sigh, "I just wish it was more royal." And then he wrote me up for insubordination. Story 70. One time my boss was trying to figure out iTunes. Boss, "Hey Rebel, is there a way I can borrow a song for a few days and then give it back?" Me, completely baffled, "I don't think so. You just pay and then download the song." Boss, "Oh, I saw here it says iTunes library." Me, silence. Story 71. Argued with me about whether or not someone born in 1993 could be over 21. This was in May. We were discussing if a new hire could drive the company vehicle, they needed to be over 21. Boss looked up their date of birth and said, "I don't know. 1993. I tried to reason with him. The conversation ended with my boss saying, "I don't know. I'll have to ask him."